What's up, guys? Air Codes here again. Consistent 2 days in a row on the walk thing, so hopefully I can keep that. The weather's been holding out, so but I told you I was going to kind of vlog and let you know how the development of switching from like PHP to Ruby, and doing more new projects in Ruby on Rails. And what I'm finding more is it's a difference in the frameworks more than it is a difference in the language. Like, so let me unpack that. So like Ruby and PHP are very different in their syntax, in their language as it is. So that being said, we're using Rails to develop the website. It's not like it's vanilla Ruby to put these websites together, right? And sometimes PHP works that way, where PHP is like you can write within a web page direct PHP code and have it come out into the browser, right? So like I could literally embed all the PHP code into a web page, right? So if it's a PHP file, I can have one HTML page. Mostly it's a .php file, but it could be HTML mostly in there, and then I can literally write all of my PHP in that same file, make database calls, loop over things, generate things, that sort of thing. And that's with vanilla PHP. And if you're new, vanilla means just regular PHP, no frameworks or anything special with it. Where Ruby doesn't exactly work that same way. And so, there's embedded Ruby, which is used in Rails. And so more than anything, they're not like apples to apples, like PHP and Ruby. It's more like combining like Laravel versus Ruby on Rails, I guess. And like I said, I can develop in Laravel. I don't typically use it because most of the time most of my clients want WordPress. And so you kind of do some stuff natively in WordPress instead of Laravel. And then like you don't need Laravel installed on whatever server you're using and that sort of thing, because PHP and WordPress is already there, but maybe not the ability to do Laravel and all the other stuff that needs to happen. So, but that being said, what I'm realizing more is it's not so much PHP versus Ruby as it is Laravel versus Ruby on Rails, because I think those things are more comparable than the languages. Again, like PHP is a web server language. It's a backend web language. And Ruby is it's not just a web language, right? It's more like a Python where you can do a lot of different things with it. So that being said, what do I think about the difference between Laravel and Ruby on Rails? So it'd be Laravel on Rails, I guess. Well, it's tough to say. Reason being are a couple things, right? So with Laravel, you can run a command. I want to say it's Breeze. I want to say it's Laravel Breeze. And with that, when you run the command, you get like a user login system, right? And it's built completely for you. Nothing you need to do. It makes the database tables. It does all the security. It does all that stuff, and you don't even have to think about it, right? And it just plops it in there for you. I don't know. I don't think Rails has something like that. I'm guessing there's probably a gem or something that you can add. And again, if you're a beginner, a gem is just basically like a package, right? If you're familiar with Node, a Node package, or if you're familiar with Composer, a Composer package, which is basically somebody else's library of code that you pull into your code. So I'm assuming there's a gem that's like that for Ruby, but it's not like part of the actual, like it's not handled within Laravel itself or Ruby on Rails itself. It's, like Laravel does. Laravel has people that they pay, and, they actually monitor this stuff and all that other things. So that's one point for Laravel. However, that being said, point for Rails is Rails has this command called a scaffolding command. If you know what I'm talking about with command, both Laravel and Ruby on Rails come with a command line tool. And that command line tool allows you to generate files and do a few other things. You can even interact with the database there. It's Tinker, PHP Artisan Tinker in Laravel. You can write, the eloquent and be able to manipulate database tables and stuff like that. In a Ruby, again, I'm trying to remember what it is. It's can't remember what the command is. I told you I'm real new at it. But you run the command and it gets you kind of in the same sort of thing where you can practice running scripts or running code within that actual special line. But then there's the command line itself, which allows you to create and generate files. So for instance, if I was to say PHP Artisan make controller my new controller, let's say we call it that, Laravel would generate all the code to make a controller. Same thing goes for make model, right? So again, PHP Artisan make model, it would be the database model that it generates for you. So when you are adding something like to do CRUD stuff, you're going to need to run separate commands, one to make your model, one to make your migration. So you need the migration because the migration goes based off of, or the model goes based off of the migration by a naming convention. So for instance, if I had a table called names, let's say, so I said, PHP Artisan make migration, create names table. Let's say that's what I call the table. Laravel knows that you want that database table to be names. And then when you make the model, you name it similarly to what you named the migration. So basically, when you put in the name, so again we said names, it might be reserved, who knows, but for just bear with me here. So when I go to make a model, I say PHP Artisan make model, and I put in name, singular name. And by the naming convention, Laravel knows that the model name goes with the migration names, just because of the naming convention. And then you need to also make the controller. And again, if you're new to programming, this might be a little bit above your understanding right now, but both Rails and Laravel have a MVC convention. So basically, M stands for model, V stands for view, C stands for controller. Okay, we've already covered the M, the model, right? The model is basically what you're trying to pull out of the database. Okay, so let's say, or put into the database, whatever it is. So basically, it kind of is like a schema. Well, the migration in Laravel is like, let's simplify it. So the model is like a schema for the database, right? What you actually want to pull out of it. The view, let's go to the controller next. The controller is what does all the logic, okay? So if you were to go to the controller would load what you wanted to load. So that would call in the model. So it'd say, all right, let's pull in this model, right? And it pulls all the code in for the model. In the model, you're able to run any of the functions that may be along with it, right? Like update, right? So let's say it's names names update, right? And so like in a lot of languages it would be names dot update, but in PHP it's names with a little arrow update, right? And that's how you would call in the method that's on the model. So anyways, that's a controller basically handles the logic. So we'd be able to say, names all would get us all the names that we have, and then we could pass them to our view. And so the controller then looks for a view, and we tell it, hey, if we're running this code, if we're inside the controller right now, right, and the method on the controller is all names, let's say, this is all defined within a method, so that when the routes grab the file, it can put everything through. All right, but basically it will return a view, and the view is the HTML basically that you see, right? All the stuff on the page, what you can view in the browser. So if you can imagine it that way. So again, just to give you a quick recap of that, your model is like your database model, things that you want to, methods that you want to use with that model or with that database stuff if you want to interact with that database. The controller is what handles all the logic. It grabs the right models, it grabs the right views, it can pass stuff back and forth. So that's your controller. And then you have the view, which is what you see in the screen on the browser. So that's kind of the MVC style of doing things. Okay, so now we understand those things. When you are doing a Laravel application, if you want to do CRUD operations, which stands for create, read, update, delete, right? Basically, what you normally want to do when interacting with, data on a website, you need to create it, read it, update it, and delete it, right? So if you want to work that way, you need to, in Laravel, create, and these are separate commands. You need to create the migration, create the model, create the controller, add the route to the controller into your routes, and then after you have that done, you need to the route, the controller, and then you need to return the view and then write the view. So all that needs to happen, several different commands and several different things that need to happen in Laravel. Now that's fine because it allows you a lot more customization with things. However, the thing that's really nice about Ruby on Rails is you have this thing called a scaffold, okay? Or scaffolding. And this is one command that you run in the Ruby, for Ruby. So it's Rails create scaffold. You give it a name. And then in that same sentence, right, or that same command line window, you put a space after you said that, and then you would tell it what you want each of the things in the scaffold, or in basically the migration to be. So for instance, for names, we might have, ID is a number. So we'd say ID, is ID number, or integer, ID integer, first name, string, second underscore name, string, right? And whatever else you want to pass in there. And when you run that scaffold command, it's going to build all of that stuff that I told you have to do in Laravel for you. So it's going to add the routes. It's going to add the routes to your routes folder, right? Which we didn't really get into much, but it's going to add the routes for each particular thing. So it's going to add the create new, the update, the delete, right? All that is going to create all of those routes instantaneously. So no coding there, just going to do it for you. It's also going to create your model, which, you know, we talked about, you know, with the database interaction. It's going to have the migration set. So once that scaffolding's run, you basically run, you know, Rails DB migrate, and that's going to pull all that stuff into your actual database to bring in the new tables and fields and all that other things. And it's going to do your controller and start your views for you. So it's going to make a file where all your views can actually can sit. And then based on what's there in your controller, you can change, you know, what, based on the routes, you know, the slashes and then what the names are, you can change what you show because you can run different functions based on that. But, you know, for all intents and purposes, in one command, you can have an entire thing made for you. All that stuff is done. And it's really nice. It's really fast. Okay, so again, those are two things that are similar between Laravel and Rails, but they're very different, right? And I guess depending on what you're doing, you know, you might not need the scaffolding in Ruby on Rails. But to me, most of the time, you know, that's kind of what you want. You want to be able to do a quick CRUD operation. You need a page that's going to do the input. You need a page that's going to do the edit. You need a page that's going to, you know. So it makes a lot of sense, and it's very, very fast. So again, you know, it's not crazy different, but they are different. And they have little quirks in which ways that they work better. So it's tough because I know I started this journey saying, hey, you know, I really want to learn Rails more, and Ruby on Rails and get better at that and offer for my business. And then, you know, I keep thinking back to, well, in Laravel you have this. In Laravel you can do that, right? So in this particular situation, right, the scaffolding is nice in Rails. Awesome. I can see using that all the time, right? But, you know, the Laravel allows you a little bit more customization, and the routing works a little bit different in Laravel as well. You know, so it's tough to say. Got to keep going with it, see which one I like better. Because again, I'm not super well versed in Laravel. Like, I've used it several times, and I like it. You know, I don't know which is better. You know, I think just the fact that you have that scaffolding command in Rails is quite compelling. But we'll see, right? This could end up, you know, a couple days from now, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to stick with Laravel. Or be like, you know what? I really like the Rails experience. I don't know. You know, we're going to see. We're going to build this app that I'm building and see how that goes. Because I actually started this app in Laravel a few months back, and I never got the chance to finish it. So it'll be a good comparison because I'm going to build the exact same app in Rails. And that'll be a real fair comparison between the two experiences, you know. So anyways, just keeping that vlog open and letting you guys know where we're at. That's a good overview of MVC, a little bit of routing, but like what all the things do, and you know what the command line does in generating and helping you build your application faster. So anyways, that's where I'm going to end the video today. Again, this is Eric Codes. Again, if you have any questions about stuff, leave it in the comments below. I'll get back to you. Thanks.